Okay, so you should already be aware of factorising from GCSE, so hopefully this video is just a reminder. Factorising is the opposite of expanding brackets. It's when we're actually putting stuff back into brackets, and we can factorise if the terms in an expression have common factors, okay? So if we look at this example at the top here, xy plus xz, we can factorise this because both of the terms here have x in them. So we can factorise out x, so this xy will now just be y, and this xz here will now just be z. So we factorise this by taking out the x, okay? If we look at this example down here, 3x squared y plus 6xy squared, this one's a bit more complicated because we have quite a few terms that we can factorise out, okay? So here we have a 3 and here we have a 6, so they are both multiples of 3, so we can factorise out 3. Here we have x squared and here we have x, so we can factorise out x, and here we have y and here we have y squared, so we can factorise out y. So we can write this, so we have 3x squared y here, and we factorised out 3xy, so we're just going to be left with x because we have this x squared here, and this is going to be plus, so we factorised out 3 and we have a 6 here, so this is now going to be a 2. We factorised out this x, and we have y squared here and we have y here, so we're just going to be left with one of the y's here. So we're going to be left with x plus 2y like this here when we factorise out 3xy. Okay, now you also need to know how to factorise a quadratic. So this is of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? So in order to factorise a quadratic, you need to find two numbers that multiply together to give AC. So A is the coefficient of x squared and C is this constant on the end. So you need to find two numbers that multiply together to give AC and add together to give B, and B is the coefficient of x, okay? So let's do an example. Let's say we have the quadratic x squared plus 5x plus 6 like this here. So C is 6, B is 5, and A here is 1 because we just have this x squared. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give AC. So A is 1 and C is 6. So 1 times 6 is 6. So AC is 6. And we need to find two numbers that add together to give B, which is 5. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give 6 and add together to get 5, okay? And if you think about this, the two numbers that you can use are 3 and 2. They multiply together to give 6 and they add together to get 5, okay? Now what we're going to do here, this 5x, we're going to split this up into 3x plus 2x. So we're going to write this as x squared plus 3x plus 2x plus 6. It doesn't matter which way you write this round, okay? And what we're going to do here, these two expressions here, we're going to factorise these individually. So if we start with x squared plus 3x, we can factorise out x from this. So x squared is now just going to be x, and then 3x is now just going to be 3, like this here. And then this 2x plus 6, we're going to factorise out 2. So this 2x will now just be an x, and this 6 will now be a 3, okay? And you can see that these two brackets here are the same. They're both x plus 3, okay? What we can do with this expression here, we can write this as a product of two brackets. One of the brackets is going to be this x plus 3 here, and the other bracket is going to be whatever is left over, which is this x plus 2. So this is going to be the other bracket, and this is how we factorise it. X plus 3 multiplied by x plus 2, and this is the factorised form. Now what you'll notice is we have x plus 3 and then x plus 2. These are actually the two numbers that we had down here. So when a is 1 and you just have x squared here where a is 1, you don't actually need to worry about this step here. You can just go straight from this to this by writing this as x plus 3, x plus 2. Okay, so here's another example where we have x squared minus 2x minus 8. So here the c is minus 8, the b is minus 2, and again the a here is 1 because we just have this x squared. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give ac. So a is 1 and c is minus 8. So this is just going to be minus 8, and add together to give b, which is minus 2. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give minus 8 and add together to give minus 2. And if you think about this, this is minus 4 and 2. They multiply together to give minus 8 and they add together to give minus 2. So therefore we can factorize this into the form x minus 4 x plus 2. And this is the factorized form, and we don't need to worry about this step here. Okay, so here's a different example where we have 2x squared minus 7x plus 6. And this one is a bit different because the coefficient of x squared is no longer 1, it's now 2. And this makes it a tiny bit more complicated, okay? So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give AC. So A is 2 and C is 6, so 2 times 6 is 12. And they need to add together to give minus 7. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give 12 and add together to give minus 7. Now, a bit of a tip with these questions. If you have a quadratic of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, so b and c are positive numbers, that means the two numbers that you need to find will both be positive, okay? Because if you multiply two positive numbers together, it's a positive number, and if you add two positive numbers together, it's a positive number. However, if instead it's of the form ax squared minus bx plus c, both of the numbers that you need to find will both be negative, because if you multiply two negative numbers together, they're positive, but if you add them together, they're negative, okay? And then if it's of the form ax squared, it doesn't matter if it's plus or minus b here, it doesn't matter, it's the same result, but then it's got minus c on the end here. The two numbers that you need to find, one will be positive and one will be negative, okay? Because the only way you can get two numbers that multiply together to give a negative number is if one of them is positive and one of them is negative, okay? So if we look at our example here, 2x squared minus 7x plus 6, so here we're of this form here because we have this minus b, this minus 7, so both of the numbers are going to be negative. So we need to find two negative numbers that multiply together to give 12 and add together to give minus 7. And if you think about this, you can use minus 4 and minus 3. Okay, so these are the numbers that we're going to use. Now, unlike before, remember when we had the 1 as the coefficient of x squared, we cannot put this straight into the brackets. We have to do the method again where we split this minus 7x up into minus 4x and then minus 3x. So we're going to write this here as 2x squared and then minus 4x minus 3x plus 6, like this here, and we're going to factorize these individually. Okay, so we have 2x squared minus 4x, so we can factorize out 2x from this here, so 2x squared will now just be x, and then minus 4x, if you factorize out 2x, will now be minus 2, like this here, and then we have this minus 3x plus 6, okay? We're going to factorize out minus 3 from this minus 3x plus 6, so this minus 3x will now be x, and this plus 6 will now be minus 2. We need to factorize out the minus here because we need both of these brackets here to be the same. We need them both to be x minus 2, like this here. And therefore, we can write this here. One of the brackets is going to be this x minus 2, and the other bracket is going to be what's left over, which is this 2x minus 3, and this here is how you factorize it. Okay, so here's another example where we have 6x squared minus 11x minus 10. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give AC. So A is 6 and C is minus 10. So 6 times minus 10 is minus 60. So we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give minus 60, but add together to give minus 11 here, okay? So as we talked about before, it doesn't matter if this is plus or minus here, this b. If you have this c at the end that is a negative number, it means that one of the numbers is going to be positive and one of the numbers is going to be negative. So we need to find a positive and a negative number that multiply together to give minus 60 and add together to give minus 11. And if you think about this, you can use minus 15 and 4 because they multiply together to give minus 60 and they add together to give minus 11, okay? So we can split this minus 11x here, we can split it up into minus 15x plus 4x like this here, and then we have this minus 10 on the end, and we're going to factorize these two expressions individually. So we have 6x squared minus 15x, so we can factorize out the x, and because we have 6 and 15 here, we can also factorize out 3 as well. So we can factorize out 3x, so 6x squared will now be 2x, and minus 15x, if you factorize out 3x, will now be minus 5, like this here. And then we have this 4x minus 10, so we can factorize out 2 from this. It's going to be plus 2. This 4x is now going to be 2x, and this minus 10 is now going to be minus 5, okay? So we have 2x minus 5, 2x minus 5, so this is going to be one of the brackets, and the other bracket is going to be this 3x plus 2. Okay, now everything that I've talked about in this video so far has kind of been pointless because there is a trick that you can do with your calculator in order to factorize quadratics like this here. Okay, so let's do this for this 6x squared minus 11x minus 10, okay? I'm going to, for the purposes of this video, assume that you have the FX991CW because this, I think, is the calculator the majority of students have. I talked about in my intro video on the Edexcel A-level maths course, this is the calculator I recommend for you to have as well. So I'm going to assume that you have this calculator for the purposes of this explanation, okay? So if we use this quadratic here, so on your calculator, press the home button to get this screen here with all the different options that your calculator has. Select the equation option to get to this screen, then select polynomial for this screen, then select the ax squared plus bx plus c as we're working with quadratic to get this screen here, and then insert the numbers for this quadratic here. So the coefficient of x squared is 6, the coefficient of x is minus 11, and the constant on the end is minus 10. If you do this and then press OK, it will give you the solutions to this quadratic equation here. Essentially what it's doing is it's equaling this to 0 and finding these solutions for x, okay? Now, if you do this on your calculator, the two solutions it gives out x is equal to 5 over 2 and x is equal to minus 2 over 3. And we can use these solutions to get it into the factorized form. So if we look at x is equal to 5 over 2 here, if we bring everything onto one side, so this x is equal to 5 over 2, if we multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of this denominator here, so it becomes 2x is equal to 5. And then if we bring this 5 onto the other side, so it becomes 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. Like this here. If we now focus on this x is equal to minus 2 over 3, if we multiply both sides by 3 to get this 3x is equal to minus 2, and then bring this minus 2 onto the other side to get that 3x plus 2 is equal to 0, we have 2x minus 5 here, which is this bracket, and 3x plus 2, which is this bracket here. So this is a really good way to get it quickly into this factorized form using your calculator, especially in an exam. You can do it really quickly and it's really useful for saving time if you don't want to use one of these methods here, okay? Just to note, this only works obviously if this quadratic can be factorized. There are some quadratics that can't be factorized, and you'll be able to tell this because if you put the quadratic into your calculator, the x value would be a load of decimals, okay? So you can't get it into a clean factorized form like this here. Just as well, some quadratics don't have a solution and therefore they can't be factorized, and the calculator will give back a value and it will have an I with it, which means it's an imaginary number, which means there's no solutions to the quadratic. And we're going to talk about this in the discriminant video in year 1 chapter 2. Okay, so I just want to finish off this video with a few more things. So firstly, they could give you a quadratic like this here, minus x squared plus 2x plus 3, where you have a negative number as the coefficient for x squared. Now this you can put into your calculator and factorize it like we saw before. However, if you're factorizing this yourself, this minus coefficient for x squared can get a bit annoying to work with. What I would do personally is I would factorize out minus 1 from this entire quadratic here, so it becomes minus x squared minus 2x minus 3 like this here, and this quadratic is a bit easier to work with, and you just have the minus at the front here. An expression that they quite like to give you is an expression like this here, where you have x to the power of 3 plus 7x squared plus 12x, okay? Now this isn't a quadratic because we have this x to the power of 3 here. However, we have x common in all of these terms, so we can factorize our x from this. So x to the power of 3 will now be x squared, 7x squared will now be 7x, and 12x will now be 12, and this here is a quadratic that we can work with. They quite like to give you expressions like this here, okay? Now another thing that they really like to do, and something that you need to be really aware of, is the difference of two squares. Let's say that we have x squared minus y squared. Now when you look at this doesn't look like that it can be factorized because you have no common factors in x squared and y squared. However, this is the example of something called the difference of two squares, and we can write this as x plus y x minus y. The reason we can write it like this, well, if we just expand this here, x multiplied by x is x squared, y multiplied by x is xy, minus y multiplied by x is minus xy, and y multiplied by minus y is minus y squared, like this here. And these two will cancel out to just leave us with x squared minus y squared. You can see that this is the same. So this here is the difference of two squares. Always keep an eye out for this form, the difference of two squares, when you have something like this here, where you have a square number minus another square number. So another example of this is something like x squared minus 4. We can write this here as x plus 2, x minus 2, because 4 is a square number. You can square root it to 2 like this here, and you have this x squared here. So always keep an eye out for the difference of two squares.